Thank you guys for tuning in to another amazing episode of RNELLY'S World. You guys already know the spiel. Before we get into this video, do me 3 quick favors. Go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe to this video right now. Go ahead. Stop playing. You playing. You playing for, yeah, you. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Go ahead and subscribe to this video. Stop playing. Jeez. As you can probably tell by the title of this video, yeah, it's about to go down, okay? I'm gonna share some things with you guys, and I probably have never told these particular instances to another person except one person. Of course, that would be my best friend, who was around for most of this stuff that actually transpired. So shout out to my best friend who is probably watching this video right now. So anyway, as you can tell, the title of this video is, How Could You Hurt Me? How could you hurt me? I could not sum it up in one video. So, for you guys and you guys only, now don't tell nobody I did this for y'all, all right? Don't tell nobody. For you guys and you guys only, this is going to be a 3-part series. How could you hurt me? Number 1, how could you hurt me as it relates to church and ministry? Number 2, how could you hurt me okay, you only had one finger up, it's all right. Number 2, how could you hurt me as it relates to my family? And number 3, how could you hurt me as it relates to relationships? Y'all, I'm kind of, some of the instances, when I think about it, I'm like, do I want to talk about this? But yeah, I'm going to talk about it because, everybody else is talking about what they want to talk about. These are going to be videos that are going to help somebody. So please, this is my disclaimer. These videos are not with the intention to expose anyone, to hurt anyone, to unravel or uncover the truth that may or may not expose or shine negative light on other individuals. These videos, I'm sorry, my tongue is really thick, y'all, my bad. These videos are with the intention of helping somebody to heal. Plain and simple. It was a healing process for me, and I hope that by me sharing my story that you guys can heal as well. Okay? Cool. Let's get it. All right. Where do I begin? Hurt as it relates to the church. If I could go back through the recesses of time and think about all the times in my life where I have been hurt in a church setting, it is more instances than I have time for, and that you guys probably want to listen to. But to be honest, a lot of it is real juicy, so I'm sure you'll stay tuned. But I remember being really young, maybe about 13 or 14 years old was the first time that I really experienced my first negative situation in a church setting. And at that time, my mother, God rest her soul, may she continue to rest in peace. My mother and my father were going through a situation, and my mother basically wanted to end it all in the marriage. And so she went to seek help from her leader. Now, one thing about my mother is my mother was a devout, holy woman of God. I never heard or saw my mother do anything that made her salvation be questionable. Now, I'm not trying to say my mother was Mother Teresa or she was a saint. Well, actually, my mother was a saint. She was not perfect, but she tried her level best to live upright before God and do that which was right in his sight. Always. She would always teach us certain things to do when we were in front of other people. And, I appreciate my mother for those lessons, because I'm telling you, some of those lessons, I still rely on some of those lessons even now. And it's crazy. You never know how instrumental or how important someone is in your life until they're gone. And I miss my mother every day. And there's so many things I wish I could say to my mother that I never got the opportunity to say because she's no longer with us. But she's still right here in my heart. And most of this looks like my mother. So shout out to my mama. I love you. So my mother, she proceeded to ask the pastor's daughter about a divorce lawyer. And so one thing led to another, and a couple weeks later, we were released from the ministry. And we were released from the ministry for something that to me was so stupid. But I believe it was the hand of God moving us out of the way because he knew what was going to happen in the future. And so I'm grateful to God that things happen the way that they happen. But one of the first things that I felt as it related to church was rejection. I felt rejected because I grew up in this church. I had a lot of my family was in this church. I was very, very, very close to my family. And after this debacle, my family took a mean turn. And even to this day, my family has not truly recovered from it. There is a invisible divide that is in my family. Now, here's the thing. Now, this video is supposed to be about ministry, so I'm going to try my level best to separate the two. But the unfortunate part is, in the beginning stages of this, they're very much so intertwined. So, y'all, I'm not talking about relationships today. Y'all wait for 2 weeks from now. We'll talk about relationships. But even to this day, my mother had 3 sisters that eventually became 4 sisters that were part of this particular ministry. And when my mother and I and my younger brother ended up not being a part of this ministry, my family, in a sense, disowned us. I'm sorry, y'all. Truth hurts. It felt as though we were disowned. What used to be seeing my aunts every single weekend went from only seeing my aunts when somebody else in our family died, because of a church. And I'm sorry, but you can't tell if a church is gonna make you act like you don't have family or act like your family doesn't exist. Something is wrong. That is not the church that Jesus died for. I don't care what nobody says. That is not the church that Jesus died for. Jesus did not die for a church to separate the people from the family. And that's the thing that was very unfortunate, because that was one of the very first things that caused a very negative stigma and downward spiral for me, was dealing with rejection in church. And as time went on, I began to see it more and more, to the point where I was slightly suicidal. But I'll get into that a little bit later. The night that everything went down, that we were released from this ministry, people came to our house, and basically released my mother and myself and my brothers from actually, it was just me and my mother. And I'm like, how do you release a 12-year-old child? How does that happen? But hey, it is what it is. So we were released, and my youngest brother was not released. That's the weird part. Like, okay, so you think somebody gonna let their child go to a church they don't go to anymore? No, not gonna happen. So that happened, and I remember my mother saying when they left, she said it felt so cold that night. It was very cold, and she said everything was just cold. How her sisters, I think it was one or two of her sisters were there, and how they could be there and go along with this. And from that day, even up until now, there is a divide. My mother is no longer here with us, but there's still an invisible divide. And I am walking in my purpose, and I am fulfilling kingdom destiny, and there is still a divide. And it just goes to show that rejection oftentimes can even go beyond the grave. My mother's no longer here. The issue wasn't with me. You had an issue with my mother, which was your sister. How does that work? So, I oftentimes think about it. Well, I don't oftentimes think about it anymore because I'm healed from it. But I experienced rejection from my aunts. All of my mother's sisters, my family was very tight knit. My mom and her sisters, she has six sisters, sorry. And they just, to me, when I was growing up, they just seemed so perfect. Our family, even though we had problems and issues, it just felt so, I don't know. And then after that, there was such a major disconnect to the place where out of all six of my mom's sisters, my mom only became close to two. And those were the two sisters that did not go to the same church. And those two sisters became my mother's rock. And one in particular who I thank God for every day, because every time I see her, she reminds me more and more of my mother. She looks more and more like my mother. She's just a little bit taller. But I've never understood how you could allow a church to separate you from your family. I don't understand. I don't get that. But let's move on. So let's fast forward from 13 all the way up to 21. 21 years old. We fast forward 7 years, and I am now a part of another ministry. I actually joined this ministry before my mother did, because I wanted to expand my music, you know what I'm saying? I wanted to sing. I wanted to be able to be allowed to preach, because at the last ministry, I was given an opportunity to speak, and I knew that there was something different about me, even as a young child. I think I shared this in a previous video, that even as a small child, I knew that the hand of God was on my life. Jeremiah 1:8 was one of my favorite scriptures that talks about how even in your mother's womb, I anointed you a prophet unto the nations. It was one of my favorite scriptures growing up as a child, and it's something that always resonated in my mind. And I knew that there had to be a call on my life, in which there was, but the enemy's intention was to snuff me out and to cause there to be such a depth and level of sexual immorality that I would never fulfill my assignment. But the devil lost again. So, fast forward, I was a part of a ministry. I was singing. I was given opportunities to minister during youth nights. I was a part of a greater a part of the music ministry on another scale, a district scale, a jurisdictional scale. I was able to sing at national conventions in the choir behind artists. I was given so many great opportunities to share my music ministry. I also learned a lot of valuable lessons about prayer, fasting, and so many other great things. There was a lot of good that came in between year 13 and year 21. A lot of great things. As I said, I was given the opportunity to speak, to preach at either 11, 12, something like that. I knew that the call of God was on my life. I remember going to my pastor and telling my pastor, I believe that I'm called to preach. And I don't remember what he said. I just believe, if I'm not mistaken, he said something along the lines of, it's not time. No, like that. And of course, you're young. So of course it's going to crush you. You feel like you're not ready. Within myself, I kind of felt like, you're not giving me the opportunity because of what you've been told or what you perceive or what you think of me. And of course, at that age, we kind of feel ourselves, we smell ourselves, we think we know everything. And that was just that. So he said no. Now, of course, I was already taking speaking engagements outside the church. I was already, going places, bootlegging it, like a lot of y'all who are probably watching this video. I was bootlegging and preaching. And it's crazy because if you have a gift, God will use your gift even when you're out of order. Because I would go places and minister without permission. And the crazy thing is, miracles, signs, and wonders would happen. I would lay hands on people, they would get healed. I would preach, people's lives would be changed. I preached at a particular church that that used to record the services. And I preached at that church for a youth service. And then later on, I ran into, it was either the pastor or the audiovisual director who said to me, the Sunday that you preached was we sold the most DVDs we have ever sold while we've been recording. And I was like, whoa, wow, like that's crazy. But it's because I knew what was in me, but the person that was covering me would not release me. So I remember I left the church, went to another church in our organization, was there for a couple of months, ended up having car trouble, ended up going back to the same church. I didn't want to go there, but I did. And I was just kind of like, let's just make the best out of this. And I went back, and the whole time I was there, I did not want to be there. Now, I'm not going to say the whole time. Part of the time I was there, I didn't want to be there. That's when now this was a very, 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 I'm trying to think of the right word so it'll come out right. This was a Pentecostal church. They believe in speaking in tongues and living holy, women don't wear pants and men don't wear short pants and men don't wear their feet out. And, these are things that I heard. We don't go to the movies and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I know y'all lying. This is crazy. But I'm going to do me. Y'all do y'all. I'm going to do me. Okay. So I was there, and I did not want to be to an extent because there was a lot of respect of person. There was a lot of, if you have the right last name, you can do what you want to do, pretty much. And it is what it is. You can, people can say that I'm not agree, but it's the truth. And these are things that we saw. If you weren't a part of a certain family, if you weren't a part of the circle, hey, it's what it was. Y'all, I'm being freed and liberated right now as I'm talking. I'm starting to feel so much lighter because I'm able to share my story with somebody. So, I was there, okay? Then I came in contact with somebody who would change my life from a word perspective. Not saying that, for the first 21 years I hadn't heard preaching the word, but it didn't grab me and grab my attention. It did not. But no one was able to grab my attention with the word like Bishop Eric McDaniel. I heard him one Sunday evening for a Sunday Night Live. That's what the name of the service was called, a Sunday Night Live. And this man preached, and for the first time ever, I listened to someone preach a message. And as he began to preach, I began to cry. I literally began to cry because the word it was almost as if this man was preaching directly to me. And I started crying because it's almost like this was God speaking directly to me, calling me by my name. And, he didn't say my name because he didn't know me, but it's like the message that he was preaching was so profound and so right. It was a rhema word that it grabbed me and began to shape me. And at that moment, I just felt so free and liberated. And now, of course, let me tell y'all something. We used to dance until times got better. But he grabbed my attention. And from that moment, I was at my church, but I wanted to be somewhere else. And so I started going more. I would go on Sunday nights because, I'm at my church on Sunday morning. I would go to Bishop McDaniel's church on Sunday night. And I got offered to preach for a youth revival during all of this. I made a conscious decision prior to this youth revival that I was going to leave and go to Bishop McDaniel's church. And so I hadn't necessarily left. I just stopped really going to my church. And I was asked to go to a youth revival. I'm a preacher at a youth revival. So I accepted to preach at the youth revival. A friend of mine did a flyer. And on the flyer, she, of course, was not aware that I was, no longer a part of the church that I was in. And she did this flyer. They put the flyer out. And, it's getting heavy. She put the flyer out. And that was when, the world turned upside down. I preached at this youth revival on maybe a Friday. Come Sunday morning, and I don't even know, because at the time I was living in Kinston. On Sunday morning, maybe that week or maybe the week after, my name was called over national television. That I was not endorsed by the ministry. Of course, the young lady that made the flyer was not aware that I was no longer part of that ministry. And so the flyer was released with the church that I no longer went to's name on it. And so, of course, I'm pretty sure it got back to my I know it had to got back to my former pastor, and my name was said over national on television. And I remember watching it as if, and it's like time stood still, like it feels right now, like time is standing still. And he said, I did not endorse this young man, and so forth and so on. And I just felt like nothing. I felt like nothing. I was hurt. I was shocked. I was embarrassed. I was just broken because I no longer went there. But watch this. Hear me when I tell y'all this. It was my fault for not source and fact checking. Because when I saw the flyer being put out, instead of having it corrected, I went along. I just let it stay up there. I said, well, it's not a big deal. It won't be a big deal. What I thought was nothing blew up. it blew up. And I remember feeling less than. And I remember a lot of preachers who knew me called me to console me. And, one in particular, my good friend, whose name I shall not call, but he called me on the phone and he said, listen, don't you allow this to keep you from coming to church. You need to come to church today. Because this was on a Sunday morning before our service started. And when I got to church that Sunday morning, my church family rallied around me, hugged me, loved on me. And I just was like, honestly, I felt like killing myself. I felt like killing myself because I allowed something to happen that I could have stopped. And I think that might be some of us who may be watching this. You've allowed things to happen that you could have stopped. And then when you didn't stop it, it blew up in your face. Whew, this is, y'all, I told y'all it was gonna get hot and heavy. So that happened to me. I will never, ever forget that. And that was, wow, that was over 11, 12 years ago. And I remember feeling like all was lost. Yo, it was one of the roughest seasons of my life because I knew I was anointed, but I was also exposed in a sense. Or I knew I was anointed, but I was just put on blast. And the question is, how do you recover from a great fall? Songwriter says that the potter wants to put you back together again, but I'm not preaching on it. I'm not going to preach. I'm just sharing my truth. So I was hurt. I was upset. I was angry. I was so many emotions, but at the end of the day, I understand why. He felt as though he had to protect his name, his ministry, his integrity, his brand, and everything that he stood for. So I went through life. I kept going, hurt and rejected and abandoned. And so after that, there was a great divide between my mother and I, because in the midst of all this, my mother never said a word. My mother never went to bat for me. She never said anything. And I just felt I was so hurt by it. But hey, God allowed it to happen for a reason. So, fast forward another year, I was with, where I was with Bishop, and, things started happening, and, I got connected to another family that was affiliated. And I took on this family as my own family. I will be very honest. I disowned my own family and made this particular family my family. Everybody that was their family was now my family, because I felt rejected by my own family. So, somebody like me, I love family. So when my own family seemingly rejected me, I just found another family. They were my parents, they were my siblings, their aunts and uncles became my family. And we had a good thing going for as long as it was good for. So they decided to start their own ministry, and I was so connected to them that I decided to go with them, and I felt compelled to be with them and be a part of what I believe that God gave them to do. So I was a part of their ministry. I was their very first member, aside from, the first family. I was the first member, but I was like an extension of the first family. because I was there for pretty much everything. I was like the hands and the feet of whatever we needed to do. I was there to help to work the vision. When we had our launch service, I was a part of the core. So a lot of things that happened, I was a part of, because like I said, I was like an extension of the first family. I was like the oldest kid, so to speak, but not really. And fast forward through that, I made the mistake of making someone other, and this is one of the mistakes that I don't want any of you guys to make. Never disown your own family and gravitate towards the church. You have to have a healthy relationship with your own family. Listen, try your level best to have a relationship with your family, because at the end of the day, family is all you got. At the end of the day, when something happens to you and unfortunately you leave this world prematurely, the church is not going to bury you. Your family is. So I made that mistake early on, and I'm glad I experienced it, because now I know better. Now I learned so many valuable lessons. So a scenario happened. I was there a little bit over a year. A scenario happened, and basically I felt, and now understand this, let me say this, me still being young and immature and dumb, I made another bad choice. That could have been very, damaging on a larger scale, in a sense. Now, granted, I really was not in a good headspace. I won't make excuses for my actions, but I was not in a good headspace. My father had literally just passed away, and I was just doing stuff and entertaining certain things and what have you, just to be doing it, because I was hurt. I was alone. I was just, so many negative emotions came over me, and I was really not in a good place. And the unfortunate part is nobody discerned that I was not okay. Nobody discerned that I was not okay. I really, at that time, needed somebody to talk to, and there was literally nobody there. Nobody saw the pain that I was in. Nobody saw the hurt that I was feeling. And I was hurting. I was wounded. I was bleeding. I was smiling, but I was bleeding. I was helping, but I was bleeding. I was assisting and singing and presiding and preaching, but I was bleeding. And so because I was bleeding, my bleeding eventually caused an infection. And that infection ultimately could have been damaging to the ministry. So after this bad choice decision that I made, my pastor and first lady were made aware. And I remember after the situation happened, I was just kind of like over it. I was so over it. Now, this was 10 years ago. I was over it, and I was like, yo, I gotta go somewhere and clear my mind. So I got on the road, and I headed towards Atlanta. And I remember stopping in South Carolina, and my pastor called me on the phone and started asking me questions. And then next thing you know, my pastor literally was going off on me. And in my response, because I felt some type of way, I went back. I started going back and forth, and I said some things I should not have said, and I hung up. So at this point, I drove to Atlanta, and I was in Atlanta for maybe 3 or 4 days. I was depressed. I went and hung out with a friend of mine. I literally wanted to lay in the bed the entire time I was there, because I felt so cold and alone and betrayed. And now that I look back on it, I felt like it could have been handled another way. But I think because of the nature of the situation, it was handled, I guess, in their mind, the best way they knew how to at the moment. It was something that I'm pretty sure they had not experienced before, or being in the capacity that they were in, having to deal with that type of experience. And so it was a very awkward season for me. And I'm only sharing all of this to the glory of God. Honestly, I'm not sharing it but honestly, it's the thing about it is it could have been fixed. It could have been repaired. Here it is 10 years later, and I'm just now being able to really process it. Now, here's the thing. I've forgiven them for how it was handled. But there's still, every time I have run into them, which is rare now, but it used to be more fluent, but I would run into them and I just would not want to talk or speak or anything. But I'm grateful to God that I'm in another place, that I can address them and speak without feeling some level of animosity because of how I was treated. Because I really do believe the situation could have been handled differently. Yes, it could have been, but it wasn't. I do feel as though an apology could have been given, but it wasn't. But it's really okay, because in so many words, I probably should apologize too. I'm gonna do that. So, progress. So we fast forward through that. I went through that situation. I went to, after that situation, I knew, I was like, yo, I'm kind of at a place where I'm like, I'm not really feeling church. I didn't want to go to church. And so after that, a friend of mine, knew what God had called me to do and asked me to come and be his youth pastor. So I went to his church, and the prophetic that was on my life was activated. And I served as the youth pastor for a year. I was the youth pastor, one of the administrators, and a couple of other miscellaneous job titles that sometimes can be irrelevant. Most of all, I served, in ministry, and I was there, and time, I was trying to, and I'm giving y'all a timeline, okay? I was there. I served as youth pastor for over a year, and my leader at the time knew that the call of ministry was upon me to pastor. So we were planning to launch another location in Fayetteville. So that's how Fayetteville came to the table. So we planned it. We had a preview service in Fayetteville. And when I tell you the power of God moved, God was there. And I remember oh my goodness, it was crazy. The service was just crazy. But it was an experience for real. And it confirmed so many things within myself that this is what God called me to do. And whether people liked it or not, this is who I am. And so, time went on, and, things happened, and I ended up not being able to stay there. And I moved on, and I was a part of the last ministry. Well, not really the last ministry, but in so many words, yeah, the last ministry. I never joined. I was helping the music ministry. I assisted the with presiding. I would preach from time to time. I was faithful in coming and going, and I shared with my leaders at the time that the Lord had called me to pastor. And it seemed like everything, at that time, it was more so about building what they had than helping me to become who I knew I was. Which, of course, I understand, because as leaders, when people are here to help, utilize them as best as you know how. And so I was told that I was going to be helped to, advance and to prepare. But no preparation was done. So I came in contact with someone else through an organization, through my cousin. My cousin was a part of an organization, and myself and my aunt at the time became acclimated and affiliated with the organization. I was then appointed as the state youth president for the organization. And our youth department, we had quite a few churches in North Carolina a part of this organization. And we were able to do quite a bit of things, ministry-wise and what have you. And I came in contact with a pastor from Virginia. This pastor from Virginia then was elevated to a regional overseer and was overseeing the Mid-Atlantic region. So I worked with him. I was doing the administrative part because I was the regional. I became also the regional administrator, and I got a lot of things done for the organization and for our region. And he saw the work that I was able to do and recognized the gift of administration being on my life, and still my ability to also pastor. In 2014, and this was prior to, actually, I was working with him. He asked me to come aboard with him and serve as his executive pastor for his ministry. I served in the areas of administration and some other areas. And in 2014, he ordained me an elder, and he appointed me as executive pastor. My father came down from, my spiritual father, my apostolic father came down from Connecticut. He was my homilist. And I had told my father that you will always be my father, because you birthed me into the apostolic. You gave birth to me, and nobody else can be my father. And I remember this, my pastor at that time said that, he made a comment that I was his son, and that there was a private conversation that was had that he needed to release me so that he could take over being my father. Now, this conversation happened without my knowledge and without me knowing. And when I got wind of it, I was very upset, because you don't do that. Why would you do that? So, don't do that. That didn't go over too well. But anyway, I served, and while I was serving, the Lord spoke to me and said, this is the moment, this is your hour, this is the time, and this is the season, and you need to start. You need to do what I told you to do. There is a church inside of you, and you have been groomed for this. For the past 5 to 6 years, you've been groomed for this moment. So I talked to my father, and I told him what the Lord told me. And he said, son, do what God told you to do. So I resigned from the church that I was the executive pastor over. And when I resigned, it was told to me, all is well. We love you. Nothing's going to change. That was not the case. When I did that, I stopped hearing from them. It was very interesting. I didn't hear from them anymore. We used to talk like every day, every other day, because we had a major project that we were undergoing, and a building project, and a lot of things were happening, but I stopped hearing from them. And that disconnection generally and normally would have done something to me. Well, that just about sums up all of life's issues that I've experienced in my short span of life. One thing that I will say is I learned so much from all of the things that I faced and that I experienced and that I went through. And to be honest, it was all for my good. One of the things that I want to say, this was not a gossip session. This was not a tell-all. This was a journey to freedom. This was a journey to liberation. And most of all, this was a journey to healing. Some of you that are watching this video may be asking yourself, how can I recover from a great fall? Listen, if anybody could give you any kind of advice on that, I think I would be an expert. Because one of the things that you have to learn is, first of all, how to forgive. If you cannot forgive, this will be a hard, tedious, and painful journey. And a lot of people have left the church and never returned to the church because they allowed someone or somebody or a group of people to count them out, or to say, to speak things to them or concerning them that very well may have been the truth, but it was the truth that was not spoken in love. And oftentimes when the truth is not released in love, it causes lasting effects that are dangerous and detrimental to the person that was ensued. So my thing is, my hope is, my prayer is that those of you who are watching will seek the forgiveness that is needed. Learn how to forgive other people, but most of all, forgive yourself. Forgive yourself. The Bible says that all have sinned and have come short of the glory of God. We've all made mistakes. We've all done things. Unfortunately, some of us have done things on far greater scales than others, but definitely understand that God is He still loves you in spite of all the mistakes that you could have made, in spite of all the things that you could have done. God still loves you and He cares for you. So don't count yourself out. Don't feel as though you can't fulfill the vision that God has put inside of you. Don't feel like you can't do ministry because you made some really bad choices and mistakes. But listen, take it from me. You will recover. You can recover. If it is your will and your desire to please God, He'll open doors for you that no other man can open, and He'll shut doors that don't need to be open for you. I'm such a firm believer that all things work together for the good to them that love Him and are called according to His purpose. It's His good pleasure that we walk and live the abundant life, and it's going to be your portion. So first of all, learn how to forgive. Forgive everyone else, but then secondly, forgive yourself. And after forgiveness, seek reconciliation. Try to be reconciled. Do those things which are pleasing in the sight of God. Do those things that are right in the eyes of man. And sometimes, unfortunately, you can't always please people. Being a people pleaser is one of those things that oftentimes I am very much so against, because at the end of the day, I don't care. But I'm learning how to consider the opinions and feelings of other people, because oftentimes we get so to ourselves that we don't care what other people think. And to some degree, you should care what other people think, but you cannot be controlled by other people's opinions concerning you. It's a saying out here that says, it is not my business what other people think or feel about me. And to be honest, that is a true statement. It's not your business to know how people feel or to even care. But at the end of the day, just make sure that God is pleased with your life. Make sure that God is the central figure. He is the key component. He is the key factor to everything that concerns you. Because I promise you, if you do it God's way, everything in your life will fall in line. Listen, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another great episode of RNELLY'S World. This is part 1 of a 3-part series, How Could You Hurt Me? Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you again next week.